Hello everyone, my name is Eric Zietlow. You're watching the Distributed Data Show. Today I have an amazing guest.
Hi, I'm Frank Moley.
We're going to be talking some about distributed applications, cloud native applications, and kind of where that all plays.
From DataStax, this is the Distributed Data Show.
So we hear a lot about cloud native applications. Can you explain a little bit of what those are? Like what do they do in the industry? Kind of where do they sit?
Yeah, so really, cloud native applications, from my perspective, it's really just a way of developing code. It's a different style. We used to do these big monoliths that were layered, and we're shifting to these smaller packages that there's some key characteristics, though, when you do this small package size. So one of the big things is you're building stateless applications. So state no longer can play in the cloud world, and there's reasons for that. But along with that stateless application is it has to be fault tolerant. And that's why the stateless is so important, is because when it's fault tolerant, in a cloud environment, your instances can drop at any point in time. They can get resegmented, they can move. So by being fault tolerant and not having any state, your application becomes much more resilient. And along with that, you have to be able to horizontally scale, because that's obviously the key point,
modern,
right?
Yeah,
is we want to distribute, we want to build applications that can span the globe. But really, one of the best parts of this is that when you're building an application that's cloud native, you don't have to deploy it to the cloud. And I think that that's a key thing, is if a developer wants to build cloud native applications, they can deploy it to their big iron hardware in their enterprise shop. They can put it into a VM space, or they can move it to a public or private cloud. And by doing that, they've really expanded the horizon their application can be. So they may start small, but then as their bandwidth grows and they start getting more consumption, they can span globally.
Out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the areas within that cloud native kind of umbrella that you're passionate about? What are some of the kind of interesting hot areas right now?
So for me, one of the biggest things is the idea of bringing the app to the customer. Mm-hmm. So, in the United States, we have high bandwidth. We have the ability to download large images and big web pages, and it's just not something you worry about. Right. But you get into some of these smaller countries, developing countries, and they don't have the bandwidth, and there's a lot of mobile usage. So when you start building cloud applications, you start to reach a new customer base. And if you're doing something that's, let's say, improving someone's health or improving the quality of life for them in their app, mm-hmm. and now you can bring it to them wherever they're at, that's a really powerful proposition in the industry, because we can now go beyond just doing business applications. We can start doing things that impact people in a really positive way. And of course, there's money behind it, because we all get paid. But at the end of the day, we don't do this for the money only, right? We do this because we like to build things. We like to make people happy in their daily lives. And I think that that's one of the cool things about building cloud applications, is that you can touch more people quickly. And this whole style of smaller applications and rapid development really just adds to that thrill. Another really cool thing that you deal with, with cloud applications is you start solving new problems when you write code. So back when I started writing code, it was big iron servers, and I was doing C services that were, talking to the local database and stuff like that. And now we're dealing with this distributed data problem. And that's hence the name of the show. But, distributed data is such a cool topic, because this set of problems is so much different, but it just adds to challenge to what we're doing, which makes your job satisfaction that much better, because now you have to solve not only the problem of how your app communicates with the database, but now you have to deal with how the data is distributed.
Right.
And that is really, really cool when you start thinking about all the technology that makes that happen. And working with Apache Cassandra, it just adds to the mix, right? Because now you've got this tool that works really great for distributing data, and we're doing it across the cloud. But as a developer, you can still focus on your business needs. And that, to me, adds to the value proposition of the tool.
So what are some of the challenges then in this space? Because, obviously, you kind of touched on how it's a different paradigm than what we're used to. It brings its own new set of challenges. What have you seen so far?
So I'm going to have to put on my hat, my security hat, because that's the biggest challenge in my mind. Dealing with legal responsibilities across the world, mm-hmm. because now your applications across the world, your data's across the world. Well, now you have to comply with laws outside your local little sphere.
A lot of what's been happening in Europe lately.
Yeah, so GDPR was a big wake-up call, I think, to a lot of people, because now we had to not only be responsible for protecting our customers' data, but now governments were saying, oh, by the way, you're now liable for your customers' data.
Right.
And it's not just a slap on the hand liability.
Right.
And we're talking about large sums of money for some of these bigger companies when they're looking at it at gross revenue.
Yeah.
And that's a big just wake-up call of, oh, I don't have to just responsibility to my customers, but now the government's going to check on me. So security is its own challenge anyway. And the thing about security is you will never, ever be great. Because there's always someone smarter than you. And it's humbling, right? Because you can be like, oh, I've got every check, and I've got pen testing, and I've got this system, and there's always someone smarter, right? Yeah. There's incentive to go break into these systems. So anything that you can add improves your standing. Mm-hmm. And then you bring in a tool like DataStax Enterprise,
right,
which has native security built in. And it's just, that was really what actually attracted me to this company when I was looking to sort of expand was I had been working on GDPR and trying to solve some of these problems. So a team that I was working with, we specifically were solving this for our company across multiple, compartmentalized teams. And one of the big challenges was I had written a customer data store. So we had put all of our customer data into one spot, wrote some really great microservices, this cloud architecture, we were distributing it. And we had to figure out how are we going to secure the data? And more than just secure it, how are we going to encrypt it? Mm-hmm. And we started looking at tooling, and everything was bolted on. We can bolt on this package, or we can run it through this filter and secure it. And all of those bring their own problems. And you've got file-based encryption, and that doesn't always really get you what you want. You really need row level, but it slows down the database. And then we start looking at DataStax Enterprise, and it's like, it's native. It's built in. And it gives me a little bit of confidence, just that little bit more confidence to actually go the next step with my data.
Yeah.
And then because it's a NoSQL database and you've got Solar sitting right there with it, now I don't have to worry about how do I search when I've got multiple keys on my customer data, which was a problem that we had, right?
Yeah.
Think about the way you store customer data. Quite often you want to be able to look up somebody by email as well as like a display name and maybe a last name.
Partial name.
Yeah. And all of that becomes PII. Right? Because it uniquely identifies that person. Well, it's really hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to search encrypted data. It doesn't work really well. So having that Solar index built on top of this with native security, it solves these problems. Oh, and by the way, it's distributed like your application is. So now you've got sort of this whole package of security and distributed data and search to make it actually work.
Right.
And it just makes your job as a developer that much easier when you don't have to focus on that stuff. And again, you can focus on what you're good at, which is your business domain, right? Nobody wants to worry about the customer data because that's not their business domain. Right? Unless you're like a people management system, and then that's a different story. Because then the entire payload has to be encrypted, right?
Right. It saves you time and money as a business to have it secured and essentially kind of out of sight, out of mind in a safe place.
Right. Well, and there's a sort of a saying in security of never roll your own crypto. We actually, one of the solutions at that time that we were looking at was building our own encryption routine for our customer data. And we were going to use libraries and we were going to actually roll our own crypto. But when you kind of stand back and look at it from the 100,000-foot view, we were rolling our own security, even though we were using public libraries and, well tested, we were still rolling our own thing. Right. Whereas bringing in this package that handled it for us, it just added a level of confidence that made me more comfortable as someone responsible for the security development at a fairly large organization.
Right, absolutely. So then what do you see as some of the biggest challenges in this space right now? Obviously security being such a big thing, there's kind of the whole cloud architecture, a lot of hybrid cloud stuff going on. There's a lot of areas where there's difficulties and challenges. What do you see some of the big ones?
I think when you look at the way that cloud is today, when you think of cloud, most people think of public cloud, right? Private clouds, hybrid clouds are not necessarily the first thing that people think about, though they're very real problems. It's usually public cloud. And I think there's a tendency to, I'm going to go with vendor X for my public cloud, and I'm going to use their offering, right? They've got some tool that will do distributed data. in some way, shape, or form, or at least mimic distributed data.
Right.
And the problem there is that now you've got vendor lock-in. So I've always kind of tried to focus on developing without that vendor lock-in. Now, when you're using a tool like open source Apache Cassandra or DataStax Enterprise, sure, that's a vendor. But the beauty there is that the vendor is in the tool that you purchased, not in the platform.
Right,
because
so you can span across anything.
Absolutely. So I'm not really tied to a provider. It's a database that I've purchased. I've made a conscious decision. I've done the ROI on. But now I'm not into an environment where I'm stuck with their tools because, quite frankly, I may want more fault tolerance than one cloud provider. Or a real world scenario that I used to deal with was we ran, at a previous company I worked at, we ran multiple private clouds, but we wanted to be able to also go into the public cloud and have bursting capabilities and things like that.
Yeah.
You can't do the private cloud when you're on a public, right? Your database doesn't work because there's no way to bring that public cloud database into your private cloud. But with something like DataStax Enterprise, I can run my private cloud and, if I need to go put it in a public cloud, or I want to, even if I don't need to, it's an easier transition because it's the same database. It's the same APIs.
Right.
Your app doesn't have to really change, especially if you've written it as a cloud native application. I should just be able to pick it up and drop it wherever I want to go.
Right. Just build a new data center off over there.
Absolutely. And take that back to security for a minute. When you look at new municipalities or localities building new laws, hey, customer data from this country has to stay in this country.
Yeah.
Well, the value proposition there is, vendor X is the only one there, but I'm using vendor Y. Well, now I can just take the database because I now have to have a data center there. I can still use public cloud in that country and bring the data there, but it's the same database, so your app doesn't change.
So you control basically where the data lives by replication and have it all handled for you. So it's again, out of sight, out of mind.
Right, and of course there's various ways of doing architecture around that, right? You can shard it or you can replicate it. And quite frankly, a lot of times you're going to want to have both. There's going to be some mixture of both. And having a tool that gives you the ability to do that natively, that's again, powerful because I can put it where I want it. My app doesn't change, my database doesn't change, and I control the flow of data. And then all those other things that we talked about that you just bolt on top of it, except for you're not bolting it on because it's built into the platform. I don't have to worry about it, and I can go where I want. And there's a lot to be said from a development perspective of not having to refactor every time a law changes, every time a system changes, or every time a business need changes, right? You now have an emerging market and you want to put data there, you don't have to change your app. And again, that's the power of cloud, but doing it with a security mindset and still worrying about the bottom line of your company.
Right. So, thanks for coming out today, Frank. It's been great. How can people reach you if they want to know more?
So I'm fairly active on Twitter, FPMOLES, so FPMoles is my Twitter handle. And I tend to talk a lot about security, talk a lot about development, and especially cloud native, since that's where I live 90% of my time.
So, thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming out. This has been really great, really informative. I've learned a lot. If you guys want to learn more, we'll have some links in the description, and we'll see you next time.